Oh, hello. I didn't hear you come in. Hi, I'm Reverend Matt, and I'd like to talk to you about the beast from 20,000 Fathoms. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is a 1953 film directed by Eugene Laurie. I like the little guy in the corner yelling, "It's alive." He really wants the people around him to know that it's alive. A fathom is, of course, a unit of measurement of water, though I suppose if you had a sufficiency of Jägermeister or Strawberry Quick, you could measure that in fathoms as well. Fathom is 6 feet, which means that 20,000 fathoms is a little over 22.7 miles, making that over 3 times deeper than the deepest point in any ocean, which has terrifying implications for any beast that would be from there, but I digress. The beast from 20,000 fathoms is the beginning of 2 wonderful, wonderful things. First of all, this was a film in which atomic testing awakened a giant monster that then went ahead and assaulted one of our lovely cities. New York in this case, because really we're better. When you're dealing with giant monsters attacking civilization, you're dealing with huge, broad symbolism, and so it helps if the giant monsters are extra giant and the civilization is extra civilized. Hence New York, a place where there are no trees or grass. And this was the first one of these, the first film about a giant atomic monster attacking a city. Shortly afterwards, there was Them, a film about giant ants created by radiation, and over in another country, there was a film called Gojira, translated into English as Godzilla, which perhaps you may have heard of. And so on. Giant octopuses, giant tarantulas, giant Daryl Hannah, the list goes on, and it all started here. Now, in a lot of the later films, the monsters would have attributes that were created by the bomb or by radiation. Godzilla had his radioactive breath, and the ants in Them were somewhat larger than your normal ant. This was probably a symbol of the atom itself, the atom, of course, being something very, very small that in recent years, in the early 50s, had become something very big and very dangerous. Them's a film that is more interesting conceptually than it is to actually watch. Now, none of this is true of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. This is a film that begins with scientists in the Arctic conducting atomic testing as part of something called Operation Experiment, because they can't all have awesome names. They can't all be Operation Desert Storm or Operation Flamethrower Champion or stuff like that. And because this is an American film in 1953, they're doing so very casually. They stand at a respectful distance, I suppose, but they're outside, they don't have any masks on, they have nothing to worry about. But they do. Not the fact that none of them will ever have children, but rather the fact that they have unknowingly awakened a Rhedosaurus, a 40-foot-high prehistoric reptile that was asleep in the Arctic ice. It wanders around in confusion for a little bit, much as I do when I first wake up, and then heads south to its old stomping grounds, which inconveniently someone has built one of the largest cities in the world upon. Now, the Rhedosaurus has no special powers, and it is implicitly always that size. It was just awakened by atomic testing, a symbol of the awakening of new powers by atomic power itself. A cautionary tale, then, though in the 1950s they were kind of not very good at cautionary tales about science. In The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, spoiler alert, the beast is killed by a bullet carrying a radioactive isotope, because there is no better way to deal with science gone mad than with science gone even madder still. This sort of thing happened a lot in 1950s atomic horror films, though in fairness, this is because 1950s America was a time and place that was very pro-science, when science was going to solve all of our problems. And they were wrong about that, but science is still amazing, and say what you will about the admittedly terrible cultural things going on in 1950s America, at least they knew that science was neato. Science isn't inherently bad, it just needs to be used carefully, or, failing that, awesomely. And this is really what The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is all about. Its main narrative thrust is one of the scientists who saw the Rhedosaur in the Arctic trying to convince the world that it exists, and this leads to conversations about empiricism and the nature of observation, and it is incredible. I mean, it's not 2001: A Space Odyssey or anything, but this is science fiction, the philosophical stuff, the old school. Now, this was the beginning of the giant atomic monster genre, but it was the beginning of a second thing, and that was the film career of Ray Harryhausen. Ray Harryhausen was a legend in the field of special visual effects, a visionary and a pioneer. He was a student of Willis O'Brien, who was the man who did the effects for King Kong, and therefore arguably one of the very few people with more of an effect on the monster movie than Ray Harryhausen himself had. And The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was Harryhausen's first film as lead animator. As such, it is inevitably not his very finest work, but boy does he come out swinging. Most of his greatest strengths are in full flower here. Now, one of these strengths is obviously the quality of the animation. It's a little bit jerky here, and later in his career it will become progressively less so. But whether it's jerky or not is not really entirely the point. In the last 20 years or so, whenever Harryhausen would be interviewed, he would be invariably asked what he thought of CGI, and he would give the same answer every time, which was that CGI was fine if you wanted things to look realistic. But that was never entirely what he was going for. He was intentionally wanting things to be bizarre, unearthly, fantastic in the literal sense. Now, Harryhausen's detractors, who are terrible people, will tell you that this is just a cop-out. But they are, of course, wrong and ugly. Demonstrating their wrongness are characters such as Talos from Jason and the Argonauts, and the Troglodyte from Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, both of which could have been cheaply and easily realized by a man in a suit, but that's not what Harryhausen wanted them to look like. And the Rhedosaurus looks great, not only because of the interplay of realism and the bizarre, but because of a number of things that Harryhausen does to ground it. He's a master of light and shadow. When the Rhedosaur walks through New York City, the shadows of skyscrapers pass across him, which looks very real indeed. And there's a sequence in which the Rhedosaur attacks a lighthouse that is done mostly, but not entirely, in silhouette that is absolutely breathtaking. Perhaps Harryhausen's greatest strength, however, was his use of characterization. There's nobody who's ever worked in any field of animation that poured more attention to detail into character. This was a man who could make a space monster with no facial expression look bewildered and afraid, could make an animated ship's figurehead look curious. And the Rhedosaur looks, strangely enough, a bit like a dog. It raises one of its forelegs when it's curious. It plays with a ship that it sinks like it's a giant stick. Now, this seems like it might be kind of a strange choice. It is arguable that enormous prehistoric reptiles did not behave very much like dogs, but narratively it makes a kind of sense. The Rhedosaurus is certainly terrifying and monstrous, but it is also confused and behaving according to its nature, and ultimately a victim. Making it in some ways like a dog serves to sympathize the creature. Brilliant. Then there's the design of the monster. The Rhedosaurus resembles no creature that has ever existed. There's no dinosaur that looks like this. The body is primarily reminiscent of a crocodilian, at least in the way that it holds its legs. The head is a sort of a combination between a tyrannosaur and a tuatara with fangs. It is completely not real, and yet it looks like it could be. It is a consistent, smooth, functional creature that never existed at all. What Harryhausen did was deftly balance the grounded and believable with the terrifying and fantastic. And that is why I love him so much. The day this video is going online is June 13th, 2013, which is the 60th anniversary of the release of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. A couple of weeks ago, Ray Harryhausen passed away. Apart from his genius, the passion and love that he brought to his work, he brought to all aspects of his life. He was consistently supportive of other people in the business, always happy to talk to a fan. The world is poorer for his passing, but so fortunate that he was here in the first place. Thank you for watching.